Hey guys, thanks for showing up today. Really appreciate your interest. I mean, we go in so many different directions. We talk about so many different things, and something new and unique for us to be able to share with you. And it's always been there. Just people don't really focus on it too much. Our franchises. So we're here today with Kenny Rose, who founded, works with FranShares, and so we'll get all into what they do, how they can help make your empire reality. But I do want to just give a little bit of my own thoughts and kind of are franchises good or not? And here's the reality. A franchise is you're buying into somebody else's business plan. You're paying them for that right. Now, your job is to follow the business plan that has already been proven successful in the past. So you already have this roadmap for you to make money. And you also have the franchisors basically as your partner along the way. They do take what's called a royalty, which is a top line percentage of the revenue. You just think about them as your partners. Just like if you're trying to capitalize a franchise, your investors are your partners. And there's always the how in the process to talk to investors. If you're interested in that, we've got thousands of videos there. But if we're really focused on, hey, let's talk about the franchises and the franchise opportunities, we've got literally the master pro at this. So Kenny Rose, thanks for joining today. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for that intro. It's always a pleasure.
Definitely. Well, before we get too deep into it, can you just take a few minutes and introduce yourself as well as kind of FranShares just a little bit?
Yeah. So again, my name's Kenny Rose. I'm the founder and CEO at FranShares. My career was an untraditional one, which I feel like there aren't traditional ones when you end up in franchising. But I'd started off in the world of finance. I was an advisor at Merrill Lynch, and saw robo advisors coming, especially because I was doing it in San Francisco, and wanted to see what else was out there. And I was talking to a family friend. He was the CEO of a company who coaches CEOs, and he says, "What do you know about franchising?" And honestly, I knew comically little. I mean, my middle school and high school years, I lived in a town that didn't allow franchises. They didn't want chains in there. When a Starbucks finally came in, it was all hell breaking loose. And I was like, oh, McDonald's, Subway, Taco Bell, those are franchises. And I'm like,
Okay,
what do you know
let me
about
ask you
franchise?
something.
Yeah.
I just noticed that you have a 619 number, so obviously from San Diego.
Yep.
Are you talking about OB? Because I was living down
No.
there when Starbucks showed up, and you're right, all hell broke loose.
So this is before the San Diego days. I lived in a little ski town in Colorado, or outside of the ski town called Telluride, and they're very much like it is a small. I mean, the population's 2,000 people, but they get 30,000 in tourists at a time. And but yeah, it's like you had to go 30 minutes to Ridgeway, Colorado to see a Subway. Like there just weren't franchises there. And but then obviously going to San Diego, I knew more franchises, but still, like even to this day, most people I talk to, if you ask them what a franchise is and ask you to name them a few, they're going to give you a couple food ones. And so I fell into the exact same thing, and I was like, yeah, it's all fast food. And he let me know that his company was a franchise. And I'm like, wait, there's a franchise for coaching CEOs? And that's when I found out they franchise everything: hair care, automotive, waste management. Like, if you think of an industry, there are franchises for it. And honestly, they're usually the biggest players in it. You just don't always know they're franchises because honestly, a lot of times you don't even need their service. Like, if you have a 1 or 2 story building in the US, you're probably familiar with Fish window cleaning because they are the biggest window cleaners for 1 and 2 story buildings. But outside of that, why would you know about them? And even then, probably don't know they're a franchise. They're just a company that delivers a great product or service. Go walk into any bathroom and look at this sanitation stuff in there, and you'll probably see a Service Master sticker on it. And
Are
it's
you
like
talking
there's
about those chewy little discs that are hanging
uh,
out in the water bowl?
the discs as well as like the little air fresheners that are there. Like you'll see their name a couple times, and they're in like every bathroom. And and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the great thing about franchising. It's like when you see Serve Pro trucks. Serve Pro does damage restoration for insurance, and it's like a green truck, and you see them everywhere. But again, you don't know their franchises normally, and there's always a big confusion of like what's a franchise and what's a chain. And but that's when I learned that this industry is huge. It's not just fast food's a huge industry, but franchising is almost $1 trillion industry. And so that got me really excited. I like being unique and doing something different. And so I got into the industry in what's called franchise brokerage or franchise consulting. It's called a lot. Essentially, people who, especially are trying to leave the corporate world, want to own a franchise but don't know which one. I'd educate them on franchising, recommend specific brands based on their budget, their skill set, and goals, and coach them through that whole research and purchase process. So it's not like being a realtor or an investment advisor for finding a franchise. And I did that for almost a decade. First for the largest brokerage out there called FranNet, and then eventually started my own brokerage. Went out on my own, and it was right before I was going out on my own. I heard about this company called Fundrise. Fundrise does equity crowdfunding for real estate. And they were just raising their Series A, and this fascinated me. I tore through the business model, and it just hit me. I was like, I know how to fix the franchise world. And it was fixing a problem a lot of people didn't know was out there, which is, well, two problems actually, well, three if you want to count. But first is that people who want to buy a franchise most of the time don't actually want to run a franchise. They want someone else to run it for them. They'd rather go
Mhm.
back to corporate. They want it as an investment in their portfolio. But also, a lot of people just can't afford a franchise. They'd love to invest in one, but they don't have the money. Another problem was that you've got a ton of great operators, whether they're existing franchisees or just people who've worked their way up through the ranks over the years, that would make incredible franchisees, but they don't have access to capital. Whether that's like because they want to go build 10 at a time and a bank looks at you like you're buying a home, or maybe you were a district manager for a Dunkin' for 10 years. Well, you were a district manager for Dunkin' for 10 years. You don't have $1 million laying around to become a franchisee. And even the franchisors, the parent companies, their
Right.
biggest barrier to growth is only millionaires can be franchisees. So that's where franchise came about. Franchise is the first marketplace that connects investors to franchises to invest in. It's on one side making a whole new asset class out there of income producing small business ownership. And on the
Mhm.
other side, a new path towards becoming a franchisee. And so, yeah, it's been a really great journey getting here and excited for all the things to come still too.
Love it. And you just brought up so many different things and rabbit holes that I love going down those. But just so that everybody kind of gets still an understanding between, like, we work with companies that are getting founded, doing real estate deals, scaling, and they need investors for that. Just so that you understand, franchising is like the long lost brother of raising capital. Reason is, if you already have a business, you've got two choices of, really kickstarting your true growth. And that is raise some money from investors or get other financing where you're growing your business. Or you develop it into a franchise model, and then you bring in other active entrepreneur, active investors, and they're helping you grow, scale, and build your business. So there's really, it's super related to the investment and security side. It's a little bit of a different animal.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kenny, for Kevin being here and sharing more about it. But I just want everybody to understand that because it's a little bit of a mystery for people. In terms of, my God, and even like starting at Merrill Lynch, I started as a broker just pounding on the phone and trying to sell people. And
Mhm.
amazingly, how it leads to founding companies and sitting in your chair and doing the things that you do. I couldn't agree more. Let me ask you something about that first experience because I think it's so important for everybody to learn how to sell. What was your biggest takeaway from your time at Merrill Lynch?
Yeah. um, Gosh, I almost want to say no one's going to help you. You got to go do it. It's you got to grab a phone book. You got to think of ways to get out there. But like at the end of the day, it's you building your business, and it will live or die by your hand. And I think a lot of people. think they're going to get all this help or it's just going to be so easy, but it's no, it is a grind and is a grind that you got to do.
And this is literally entrepreneurship 101, one of the great reasons of learning to be that broker and advisor, because it teaches you a lot of those skills that you ain't learning in college, and you just got to get out there and do it. So really
Yep.
wanted to point that out. Now you went to the franchise brokering side. One of the most exciting things that I see about that is not just the helping entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs become it, but there's some good incentives there for yourself, for the guys that are really good at connecting the right franchise with the right entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just kind of share a little bit more of that? If somebody wants to work with a consultant to decide what's best for them, like how does that process actually look for me, a prospective franchisee, but I don't know what I want to do?
Yeah. So it actually doesn't cost you anything to work with the consultant. They're paid by the franchisor. It's usually a portion of the franchise fee because honestly, it's expensive to find a franchisee unless you're already a made, couple thousand location brand and everyone wants to be one now. The amount of money you'd have to spend marketing to find a franchisee, someone who's got the money and qualifications and going to pull the trigger, it's worth it to just pay it out of the franchise fee to a consultant. And I think it's really important to vet multiple consultants because you want to find someone. Honestly, it's like franchises. Just because there's a lot of them doesn't mean they're all good. And so you want to find someone that like is has your best interests in mind. Like when I was a broker, I fired most clients and hope they come back. To me, it's I don't want to force someone to be into a business because if you have to sell someone to be in a franchise, man, again, the buck stops with you and like you have to be able to do it. And so if I had to spoon feed you and sell you to get into the franchise, well then it's going to be tough for you to be successful. So like I would honestly stop calling my clients when they got pretty close and see if they called me back and if see how much they were going to come after me because frankly if you don't have that burning desire to go and be a business owner and go make it work, you're just going to waste a lot of money if you don't do it the right way. So find a consultant that has your best interest in mind, is going to let you go, or like honestly someone's going to tell it to you to your face how it is because like it's not for everyone. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean it's right for everyone. And then there's finding the right brand and what's going to be the best fit for you.
Since you bring up it's not a fit for everyone, who does it fit with? Like, is there a certain like avatar or type of person, or like how do you decide if you're gonna be good at being a franchisee or not?
Yeah, honestly, that there's so many different types of franchisees. Like, there's not one specific profile, but I would say at the end of the day, it's a self-driven person. Like, there's ones that are very great with people who are, great at sales, but then there's ones that are very analytical, terrible with people, but know how to manage processes and money and follow the business plan. And so, really it's some like at the end of the day, it's like any entrepreneur, it's do you have the drive? When we were raising venture dollars for franchise, I used to kind of compare venture investing and founders to franchisees. Because when you're a VC or venture capital group looking to invest in a startup, you're looking for the business plan, but you're also looking for experience and drive. Is this the person I'm going to bet on to go make this work? And in franchising, well, they've got the business plan. So you actually get to remove that whole part of it. But then you want to see, do you have the experience and the drive? Now, experience can be transferable from different industries. People come from all walks of life and can make it work in a franchise. Just doesn't always be transferable, but like you got to look for the right skills. And the top one is like, are you driven and like, are you going to, it's that cold calling in the fishbowl at Merrill Lynch. It's like when no one's there for you, are you going to keep pushing through? Because eventually no one will be there for you. And you have to, it's down to you at the end of the day. Like you've got support, you've got systems, but it's you that has to make it work.
I think you bring up a couple of just really important points for people to think about is what franchise meets your personality, your experience. And when you talk about who do venture capital firms, or for that matter, who does, Wall Street, the high income, accredited investors, who do they invest with? A lot of times it may be a great business plan, but it may be the wrong entrepreneur doing it.
Yep.
And with the franchising, there's already a good business plan, but it does always come down, at least in my opinion, to who's the entrepreneur that's actually going to be running it.
Yeah. As we have offerings on franchise for people to connect with franchisees, like that's always the first question is who's running this thing and what's their experience. You could get the keys to a McDonald's and still run it into the ground. It's like Ferrari's a great car, but if you don't know how to drive it, it's going to be a very expensive mistake. And so at the same time, it could be a lesser known system, but with incredibly good operators who've proven themselves in other systems and they're going to be successful. So, who the entrepreneur and operator is incredibly important to make any business plan successful. Again, someone you can have the idea for Facebook before Zuckerberg. Well, some people did, but you could have the great business idea, but if you're the wrong person to do it, it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, I've heard from plenty of people. Oh, I had an idea like franchise before, and it's just like, yeah, but you weren't the person for it. Like you, so it's got to be the right operator to make the franchise work, like any business.
And I'm just going to laugh for a second because he did bring up Facebook, and there's that movie and like the background of, did Zuckerberg really steal the idea from the Winklevoss twins or whatever they're? I just love the ending of, well, they still became multi-billionaires, just oddly off Bitcoin rather than Facebook. Okay, they're not $100 billion heirs, but they still got their billions behind them. And it's still because they were smart, and maybe not they had the idea to begin with, but it doesn't matter. As long as you have that right drive, some smarts in your head, you can still do it. Don't sweat the small stuff.
To use that Ferrari example, you could be a pro race car driver and put them in a Toyota Camry, and they're still going to drive that thing pretty well.
I got to be honest. I have a Tesla Plaid. I do like to race the Ferraris. It is a ton of fun. So I definitely take that comment to heart. But I also did just pick up my Corolla for my daughter.
Oh.
I mean, she's 15 years old, and I don't want her to learn how to drive in my car. So
that's fair. That's very fair.
And I took her to school in it today, and they may want to, like me, drive that Corolla like crazy. It just doesn't do the same.
That's very fair.
All right, so enough rabbit holes. Please, can you just share a little bit more about franchise and what y'all are doing?
Yeah, so we've been around officially founded 4 years ago, been live about 2, and we've built up a network of over 60,000 investors that are looking to invest in franchises. And what I've realized over time, well, it was a thing I planned on, but it's great to see the market adopt to it, is that people know of franchises, but they don't really know about franchises. But they have a desire to invest in people and invest in small income producing businesses. And at the same time, franchise brands are really looking to expand with the right operators. Over time, private equity has become some of the largest owners of franchises out there, but brands don't really like that. They were the ones whose checks would clear and that they could afford it. And that was what, especially a lot of these operators scaled up over time. It's who's going to take it over? Well, who can afford that business? But, now we really bring up this new opportunity of the actual on the ground operator that can now be the owner. They never had the financial ability to, but again, just like startup investing, like I would tell VCs, imagine you can only invest in founders that were already millionaires and wanted someone else to run the business for them. They'd never write a check. And so here you're bringing back basically what is venture type investing, where you're investing in a founder with Drive, but you're doing it in a less risky vehicle because of like these different systems in place and business plan that's already there. And so we've worked with brands in obviously the food space, but non-food space, from like kids fitness to waste management. And it's a really exciting time because now we're looking to launching pretty soon with brands like Dunkin' and 1-800 Got Junk and hopefully Wendy's. And it's really, the market has been adopting to it. Just one of those things, you got to prove it out. And it's been exciting to see things take off, and great team we have together, and working with great partners like you that are able to help us like really scale and make this a whole new asset class for people.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I will say that operationally, y'all are a really tight ship. So a lot of these companies, like, they talk a good game and then they underperform. Y'all perform a great game, and sorry, I think you should even promote yourselves and your amazing, what you've been accomplishing and doing so much more. And on that, as a segue, in terms of what you're seeing, if I'm interested in buying a franchise, I'm a great entrepreneur, I got the drive, but I don't have the money. I come to you and say, hey, can you help me get this launched and rolling? I want to jump into a lot of those different areas with that assumption, but the reality is, what are my chances of actually getting capitalized? And I know it's always, the answer is depends.
Yeah.
The answer is always depends, but want to get kind of your 2 cents of like, is it something to invest my time, my resources, my energy to try to make it happen?
Yeah. So actually, just to make sure, you're talking about people who are like coming to franchise to like that are operators looking, or just like
Completely.
I'm an op. Yeah. So we have a really heavy vetting process because again, people are, they're vetting themselves who they're investing in. Like
Yeah.
anything you're doing, you are looking at the team that's around that you are going to be betting on at the end of the day. And so, we get a lot of people who reach out that say like, hey, I've had a great corporate career. I think I'd crush it at franchising. But honestly, that's a lot of risk. Like when it's something that you haven't actually done before,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, you could be good at it. But if you take a step back, like remove yourself from the situation, and someone approached you and say, hey, we've got an opportunity for you to invest in this Burger King. It's the guy that's going to run it. He spent 15 years doing IT at Dell, and you'd be like, can he manage a team of blue collar workers though? I'm not sure. Like it was that, you have to take a step back and be like, would people invest in you based on your experience versus if people were looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, I was a above restaurant leader at Dunkin' for 10 years and I'd like to develop 2 stores. It's like, well, yeah, they've already done that. And like they know the system already.
Okay.
But that being said, it's definitely not impossible. I think it's one of those things where like as we continue to develop too, and we're working with different brands and scales. Like some people are going to say, "Hey, I will bet on that IT guy in a different system, something that's like a little more relatable." Like, especially people in IT do well in like the automotive space because it's extremely process driven. But
Okay.
until they're like very familiar with the franchise industry as a whole, it becomes difficult to really see the transferable skills of that person because just like we were saying before of like someone moving from another industry to franchising, it's like you got to prove it and you got to grind it out. Like it's something where like no one's going to be there for you and you got to go deliver.
So if somebody is looking in the mirror and they say, well, here's my experience, here's my personality or drive, like, describe who I should be seeing in myself that I think that I would really be successful as a franchisee of whatever the consultant says, hey, this is probably best for you.
Yeah. Well, first things first, I'd say drop the idea for a month and come back. Were you thinking about it that whole time? Was it just a seed planted in your head and you couldn't stop? Like set an alarm for 30 days and don't do any other research. And if you've got other people reaching out to you, it's like, yeah, it'll keep reminding you to do it. But you really have to be a self-starter. And so it's important to like see like were you consumed by I have to do this? I couldn't stop thinking about it, or did your reminder set like, oh yeah, I forgot I wanted to buy a franchise before. So you really have to see someone who's going to be consumed by that desire to be successful in their own business. Um, Also, something where can you pick up new skills and tools? Because even if you have transferable skills, you're still going to be learning a new business system. Like, when's the last time you went to a new company or a new job or learned a new skill? How was it adapting to it? Because, like, again, you could have spent 15 years at Dell, but like you were incrementally learning changes to things that you already knew. In any franchise, it's, I mean, unless you came from the system, like I said before, you're getting a crash course that you're going to have to adopt and bring on as your own. And so it's like your ability to really, ebb and flow, but like learn things, adapt to them, and again, just like it's really focused on like that being a self starter there. The other part too is you got to be able to work with people. I mentioned there's like franchisees that aren't the best with people skills, but like they still know how to manage them and work with them. It's like you may not be the most fun person, but you know how to set goals and hold expectations, revisit, and keep going. Or you could not have that, but be very good on the personal skill level. So like it's, do you have the ability to work with people in whatever way that you do? And so that'll be part of like working with a consultant is like, hey, I'm really good at working with people, white collar professionals that I can hold accountable and have consistent reviews on. Well, great. There's franchises that fit you there. But then on the other side, if there's, I am really great at working with average Joes, chucking a truck, as we like to say sometimes in those industries, where are you able to relate on a very personal level, but still hold them accountable? So there's a lot of different parts to it, and I hate to say at the end of the day, there is no hard formula for it. If there were,
Uh,
you know,
I can
be
tell
honest.
you one more category that should never be a franchisee, and it's me and my type.
Was that?
Driven, yeah. People person, absolutely. I couldn't hold down a corporate job to save my life because I don't play well by the rules. And I never have, and I never will, and I accept that. But with a franchise, you have to play by the rules. That's the only way to be successful with it. And I just have no, we are not going to make Frosties. We are now going to throw some cherry on top and some nuts, and it's going to be something brand new and totally delicious.
Yeah.
Don't invest in me as a franchisee, please.
I I will say I could still beg to differ with you because there's different types of franchises out there,
Okay.
because we're very similar personalities. Like a lot of things you said really resonate with me. But when I was with FranNet in the franchise brokerage space, FranNet is a franchise itself too. And so, you know, do I like doing my own thing, but at the same time, it came with like the knowledge of how to start and build that business. It came with a brand name that I could rely on the roof of, but also it allowed me to, build my business in my own way. I networked in my own way. I advertised in my own way. And so like you're right, but also you're wrong. And that's why the franchise industry is so confusing. It actually it reminds me of something you said at the very beginning of like, is a franchise a good idea or a good business? And I always like to say there are more franchise brands out there than there are stocks on the NASDAQ. And if you ask someone who said every stock on the NASDAQ is good, you should not be taking financial advice for them. Like every franchise is not good. There are tons of bad ones, but there are also tons of great ones. And so, there are a ton of ways that you could succeed as a franchisee. And honestly, you could fail in one system, but totally excel in another. And so that's why it's honestly so difficult to find that right fit there.
Well, when it comes to franchise and what y'all do, I mean, it's kind of an analysis of who you're going to work with. And I know you talk about vetting there. Like, do you still participate in that process, or what is your vetting process? If, again, I'm thinking about launching this franchise I don't have money for,
Yeah.
like if I wanted to work with you, what does that actually look like in terms of a vetting?
Yeah. So I always say there's three things that we're vetting at all times. It's the brand, the operator, and the opportunity. From a brand level, great thing is that I don't care what this prospective franchisee says. There is transparency in what that brand is. You can go check out their franchise disclosure documents and learn all about the business, in a way that's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. Um, and from there, you can find out things like their location growth, their year-over-year sales growth, if there's litigation against the franchise, who the leadership team is. Like it goes on, and these things could be hundreds of pages long. And then when you're looking at the operator, it again goes down to a lot of those things we said about like what your skill set and what your experience is. Some of
Mhm.
it's not very tangible, like the drive and grit. I remember one that we were introduced to a franchisor by, which I hope to work with them still. We hop on with this operator. She had managed, it was like 10 locations of the brand for a franchisee. And we hop on the call with her, and she's like, I didn't have running water until I was 10 years old, and it was just the most gritty run through a
I
brick
totally have
wall.
some Bluetooth issues.
Oh, no.
Continue rolling on. I'm going to fix my ears.
All right. But it was just like you heard this woman and her drive, and it was like, yeah, I will bet on you to succeed. And so like some of it's very tangible and seeing like, oh yeah, I saw that you managed 10 locations, but then some of it's not tangible, like hearing their story and like understanding that they're going to have that drive to be a self-starter, to make it successful, to will it into existence. And it looks like we got you back.
It's working again. I don't know. The whole thing just blew up for a second there.
Always fun. Um, yeah, and then finally that opportunity, where honestly you could have a great brand and a great operator, but then there's some people who say, hey, you know what, yeah, I'd love to raise, I'm going to give people 2% interest, and I'm like, that sounds like a great deal for you that no one will invest in. And so you have to find partners that are willing to have like a good win-win investment for them. Some people are just greedy, I will have to say. And so like you have to make sure that you're looking out for the investors, the
Mhm.
brand, and also that operator. Like, I don't want them to fail. I want them to be successful. And sometimes that just means being tough and saying, hey, I don't think it's going to work out for you with us, but wish you luck. But at the end of the day, I take great care in how we work with investors. And so, I'm talking to like prospective operators in the eyes of my investors of like, am I trusting my money and my career to you?
I love it. So, just to kind of cover some things, just so everybody understands, you talked about the franchise disclosure document. If anybody's ever worked with me or the law firm crowdfunding lawyers, you've seen these private placement memorandums, PPMs. The franchise disclosure document is referred to as the FDD. It's literally like the exact same thing, but franchise focused instead of investor focused. But it gives you that same background and information about the franchisor, the operations, so that it's your way to evaluate a franchise opportunity based on here's the standard stock, what's going on in the background with the same type of disclosures that we deal with on the security side. And just to be really clear, with if you ever worked with franchise or you worked with anybody else that was doing something similar in terms of helping get the financing organized. With that, you actually have the FDD on one side, you have the franchise disclosure document that you're working with and considering, but then you also have a PPM and the security side, because you actually have two transactions going on, one with the franchise or one with the investors. So it
Mhm.
can get a little bit more complicated, but I just wanted to kind of explain there's similarities, but it truly is two different processes entirely.
Yeah, very different. And at the end of the day, they have the same goal, which is transparency. Like they're there for protection for people. And for a PPM, it's for an investor. For an FDD, you could call it investor, but it's for the franchisee. And it's to make sure that they are making a educated decision, that they have a clear view into what that business is. And even a unique difference between the two is that to even like sign an FDD, you have to get it. Memory's a little fuzzy. I think 14 business days before you can actually sign it. And so like they're making sure you're sitting on that thing and you are very well understood. And it's really important to actually go through these things. I think that's a terrible thing that people don't. That's how you make a bad investment. I mean, there are brands out there. I've learned to stop bashing big companies publicly, but there are some major ones that like will not have territory protections. And so you wonder why they open up locations across the street from each other. And it's like, no, they were just happy to sell a couple extra franchises, get some extra cash in the door, twice the traffic to get the brand name going, and one of them will be successful, but the other is a life ruined. And so it's important to find out, what your protections are, and also to make sure you have like the right guidance to make sure that you are protecting, you are making a sound investment.
I love it. So I have something else to actually ask you about, and I don't know if you do this or not. You probably don't. Do you ever have the prospective franchisees do personality tests?
I don't. We did on the brokerage side before,
Mhm.
and to be honest, I feel like we removed that a bit based by going on their experience. Is that you can have a lot of different personalities, but like their experience is going to show what they are capable of. Like we have franchisees that already own 10 locations, or we have franchisees that are already multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees, and so like what? Their personality test can tell me whatever the hell it wants. I know that they have a great background in order to run a franchise. And same thing with like, again, using that district manager of a Dunkin' thing. It's like they went through the ringer, they had success. Um, there's and just like I said before, all sorts of different personalities can be successful in franchising. It's
Mhm.
how they make it work for them, which at the end of the day comes right back to that beginning of like relying on yourself and your drive and making it work.
So, in summary of what I'm hearing, it doesn't matter if you are a brain surgeon or you worked at Dunkin' Donuts as a regional manager, both have a great chance of success, but realistically, experience may trump smartness in terms of opening more, or am I hearing that wrong? And I'd rather be a brain surgeon anyways.
Man, I will say, but both can be successful. It's it's honestly just I have to use the comparison to startups again. It's that there are brain surgeons who have been great startup founders, and there have been people who are high school dropouts that are great startup founders. They're just like the amount of different industries that franchising covers. It's the different types, a different amount of personalities and experiences that can make it work. So I hate to say you're right and you're wrong, because it's so tough to put one thing on it, because like whoever's going to run a Mako is going to be completely different from someone that's going to run a Smash My Trash franchise, or um a Go Glow. Like there's so many different types of personalities that can work in different systems and different industries, but at the
Mhm.
end of the day, none of them are being pushed into it. You have to have that drive to pull yourself forward. So like that's where it comes down at the like that is square one where you start, is that like when the chips are down, are you folding or are you pulling yourself up? Like that's the main basis there.
What I think would be just an interesting exercise is to have all of your franchisee prospects do the DISC personality test, the
Yeah.
D dominance, how driven are you, the I influence, how good are you at sales, basically. S, I think that's social, how well do you actually get along with people?
Yeah.
And the C is compliance. Can you actually follow a plan?
Yeah, when you put it out there, maybe it would be worth revisiting with previous deals too, and see how they compare for sure.
Like, did it match what they expected and their level of success? I think it'd be a fun scientific investigation there. I don't,
Yeah, for sure.
just going down rabbit holes because that's what's fun. But getting back to franchise, why we're actually here. I don't want to get too deep into exactly what y'all do because it is so much in the franchise world as a marketing agency, helping with the administration, helping organize and set things up for franchisee success, et cetera, et cetera. But really, I mean, everybody wants somebody else to help them get to the starting line and get rocking.
Hmm.
I know, and you've said that your due diligence, your investigation of the franchisee is so important. Can you describe a little bit more about what FranShares does to help make sure that the franchisees really should be franchisees and are the right people to accept investors?
Yeah. So we, when we're working with brands and they recommend prospective franchisees or existing ones, we're understanding their background. I guess as a huge part, like what is your history of success? Because again, you can have all the potential in the world, but you really need to prove it. And
Mhm.
so we're looking at like um, how people have performed within both the existing system as well as if they've been franchisees in other systems. A good example is there's these franchisees in Hawaiian Bros, which is like a newer brand, a couple hundred locations in development, but they've been developers with Choice Hotels, which is like Comfort Inn and Sleep Inn, top performer there. Scooters Coffee, which is the second largest coffee brand, coffee franchise behind Dunkin'. They were two-time developer of the year, set the record for a fastest store to $1 million, and then beat that record by 60 days. Then they were Verizon store developer of the year. And so like they had a history of showing success within different franchise systems. So even though they weren't existing franchisees of that system, they'd shown their ability to enter new systems and be successful. But then also there's like the intangibles, which is like I almost want to say the person. It's like the non-disc personality test. Is like when you talk to them, do you believe in them? Like those guys, they are salt of the earth Iowa guys, and they are very friendly. They're very driven. They're very on top of things, and that's another part too. Is that like as we're working through the process, is are they going to follow up on their end? Like we have to request documentation and stuff, and it's do we need to pull teeth to get this going, or are you ready to go and you're going to be running through the gate with us? So there's like I said, both those like quantifiable things like performance metrics and the qualifiable of who they are as people and would you bet on them. And sometimes I'd say it's a gut feeling, which like is the same thing that like we have a whole bunch of guts around here that we are gut checking, and then that's what we want investors to do too, because at the end of the day, like I in the last 3 years, I've had probably 800 one-on-one calls with current or prospective investors, and they always ask about who the operators are. And when they're ones who like already have invested or they're looking at investments, they're like, "Yeah, I believe that guy." Like that's what they're saying is like, "I will invest in that person." And it's the thing is that you're trusting them with your financial well being at the end of the day. And that's
Yeah.
things that even though it can look good, it's trust.
And that's, I think, one of the biggest difficulties in being either a franchisee or even more so an investor is you got to look past that shiny, look at me, this is going to be the greatest thing that there ever was in all of humanity.
Hmm.
I cut my teeth doing deals in Las Vegas. Everybody had that. 70% were complete shams. So it is really important. And I think you're pinpointing it of, do you trust the person? Do they just look flashy? Can you actually get past that to see, are they the right guy to make this franchise successful?
Hmm.
And that's, I know that you help with that process, but it's ultimately on the investors to do their own analysis, to make their own decisions. So I just wanted to really emphasize that for no good reason other than to emphasize that.
No, and honestly, it leads to a great point as we have offerings out there for investors to explore. We show the business plan, we show the numbers, but also like we show the people and record things with them and have them tell their story and what they're going to do. And, we do fireside chats where you get to ask them questions. And so it's important to like build connections with the people and also build an understanding to like make sure you're confident in making an investment because, you know, our investors are not day traders. They're neither looking to flip something overnight nor are they looking for like shoot to the moon crypto returns. So and with that, it just comes with a understanding and trust.
Are you telling me that my investment in Ethereum is not going to do it?
I'm going to say you do you, buddy.
Honestly, I would rather invest in a Dunkin' Donuts all day long. Tried and true, proven track records, proven profitability, proven plan. That's the reason why investors should be looking at and thinking about franchises. However, what we're really talking about are two different types of investors. You have the active investors, and that's literally the franchisees, putting their money where their mouth is, getting out there and doing it. But even those active investors can need and do need passive investors to fund that equity side of things. And those passive investors is here's some money. Now I want you to work hard to deliver me a return.
Mm-hmm.
And franchise, I know that you work with both sides of the table to, at the end of the day, hopefully the franchisees that are getting out there are managing to get their businesses funded and rolling forward. And hopefully your database of funders and investors also do their due diligence and are making money at the same time. And I know nothing is like the next day, especially when we're talking about building a business.
Yeah.
Have you found like a time frame of expectation for somebody to go from, I'm going to start a whatever franchise, to actually being profitable?
Oh boy, that varies extremely widely. That can be from, I mean, we've seen some that are like 5 months all the way to years. I mean, and that's the thing is that like it's what that's saying like every overnight success is 10 years in the making. Franchising, like any business, it takes time to build a business. It is not a automatic get rich quick, like I open the doors, money starts falling out of the air. It's something where the business has to be built. And that's why we always prepare investors and say, hey, these are long-term investments and you should, you know, I say I always want you to invest less that you're more comfortable with for the long term, because like that's how you're going to realize the most in franchising is that you build that foundation, you scale the business, and then it is repeatable and profitable. And so, yeah, the time frame can vary widely until profitability, but there is a reason why like most like millionaires or small business owners and franchisees make up a large portion of them. And also why private equity is so active in the space is the returns are there. It's just it's not get rich quick type stuff. And you actually reminded me also of one thing that's very unique to crowdfunding and franchising, and why there's such a great combination together. Because you talked about getting the investors, capital in there, but also one you mentioned that companies franchise because of access to capital, as another way of doing it, but they also want access to community. If I have I'm based in Chicago. If I have a franchisee in Chicago, that is now an owner with pair of the boots on the ground that is going to go tell the community to come into that business. But we also make sure to always promote local investors first, because if I live in Chicago and I invest in that business, I'm going to go to that business. I'm going to tell my friends to go to that. Oh, if I invest in a Dunkin', I'm going to ask the office to cater Dunkin'. So, it's this like as compared to like other types of asset classes where you're just deploying capital and it's sitting, it's a real, it's a building 1,000 miles away or a piece of art stuck in a vault in New York. This is something where it's like, oh, I can actually go to it and be a part of it and have my community be a part of it too.
I had one client, I loved what they did and they were unbelievably successful with it. And it was kind of quickie mart style businesses. But they franchised their first location, or they founded their first location. Then they start franchising it and advertising to franchisees based out of their first location. And then they ended up themselves opening up some more locations. But then they start looking for the investors right around the same area too. So the customers were the investors as well.
Yep.
Now they're more dedicated into it. And it's just, I saw his business swell between the franchisees, the company owned locations. I think he went from, I worked with him from 1 to I think 75 by the time He's
Wow.
just off and running and doing his own world now.
I love that. That's awesome.
Well, let me share with you. I've been honestly having this franchise business plan dream of mine. And anybody that's watching, go ahead, feel free to steal it. I think it's a great idea, but I'm actually bringing it to Kenny to beat it up and telling him, man, that's a horrible idea, or it makes sense. With franchises, oftentimes you'll have, they call it an area developer or a territorial agreement, where I buy Dallas and now I have the right to open 10 locations in the Dallas area, something along those lines. So a territory agreement, I was thinking about going and buying one. And now my job is actually not for me to open 10, but to find other franchisees that will be the operators and open those 10. And so I was like, oh, no brainer. I know in entrepreneurs, I know I can get that done. Mm-hmm. I also know that most of them have pretty good credit, but they don't have a whole bunch of money. Well, hey, I got a great idea. How about I do this territorial agreement? How about I go find the franchisees? How about I go come and work with Kenny to help us get those franchisees in a position that they can move forward with their business? Good idea or horrible? Talk me into it or out of it.
I think it could be a great idea. It, like all franchises, depends if you're going to put the effort in, because it's one thing to just sell franchises. It's another to properly support them and grow them. And that's why they do area developers, is that like they want someone who is going to be supporting those local ones. And so it's, do you believe that you're going to be able to properly support and scale those franchisees? Because on paper, great idea, but all franchises on paper are a great idea. So it's, are you going to be putting the time and effort to like help them find the right people and to help them scale? If you just kind of like say like, hey, I'm going to sell it and they're going to do great, it's like, that's very wishful thinking. So you got to make sure that like you're going to be, somewhat hands-on to get them up and going and then scaling. So it could be great, but I know how it doesn't work either.
You actually talked me personally out of it. I can take care of that sales part, but hey, you got to step up and do it yourself.
Yeah.
Probably not my business plan, but I hope somebody watching takes that ball and runs with it, because I really love that style of a business plan.
Yeah. Again, it's I've seen it work very well, and I've seen it fail horribly too. And there's different reasons why it can and can't, but that's like at the core of it, something I would say is like something you got to be very cognizant of, because that there's a reason why they are doing the area developer thing, is they want someone to develop it, not just sell it.
Well, I'm out. It was great, man.
I'm sorry to crush your dreams.
This attorney thing, but I do gotta say,
you're my attorney. That's a great thing.
I'm glad to be here for you. But I was actually going to ask if you had gone to law school, because of the way that you very properly respond to absolutely everything with the "it depends."
No, it's funny. I never dealt with a lawyer once until I started this company. And I'd say I'm a good student though. And so I have I've heard you say things right, and I make sure to emulate. And it's the same thing with my compliance stuff and how we do marketing. It's it depends, but you just gotta not make. It's just like the FDD. Actually, I learned this from franchising too. Now that I think about it, is they call it the four corners rule. Can't say anything about the franchise that doesn't fall within the four corners of the page. And so it's, don't open yourself up to liability, and don't open up the people you're working with to liability they should have known about.
And understand that the answer is always, it depends.
You should get a tattoo of that, man.
Absolutely. I am it depends on how my next week looks though. So I super appreciate you coming on today. If anybody has any questions, we do only have a couple of minutes. Just go ahead and throw them in chat. If you're watching this later on, you have any questions, throw it in chat. We'll go back and we'll answer everything for you. But while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I'm always a big education first person. So, if you're interested in franchising, it's go listen to podcasts, more podcasts. Go start getting really educated. Take a lot of time to get a deep education in it. Even like when you sign up on franchise, the first thing you get is a franchise investing guide, because like I want people to know what they're getting themselves into, because the worst mistake you can do is one that you do very quickly usually. And so you want to make sure you take the time to understand what you're doing and don't make any rash decisions. So yeah, that, and obviously if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn anytime, I'm happy to help answer those questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, what's the best way to get a hold of you? I guess that should have been the first thing that I asked. Hey, I want to work with Kenny and I want to work with franchisers. How do I actually reach out?
Well, for one, I always recommend connecting with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. But if you're interested on the franchise side as well, you can sign up to see future offerings there, as well as if you're like a prospective franchisee or existing franchisee or even franchisor. You can go to the partners part of our website and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get back to you on it.
Absolutely love it. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate your time. And I'm confident that everybody has learned a whole lot about themselves, of whether they should be a franchisee, franchisor, or just get back to IT at Dell. So
I probably just scared the hell out of a lot of people, which I'm happy to.
I mean, you talked me out of, for me, it'd be an idiotic business plan. For somebody else, it would be great. So thank you for your wisdom. Really appreciate that.
Always happy to help.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining today. We'll be back.
Thanks so much.